Well, it looks like college football and college athletics as a whole is getting ready to change and change drastically. That's right. Even more change is coming. And this change is going to send tremors, shockwaves, earthquakes, whatever you want to call it, through college athletics and is going to impact every single institution out there, no matter how large or how small, how rich, how poor. What we're talking about is the House settlement that was submitted yesterday by the NCAA and the power conferences. It's a 100-page document that was submitted for approval. Has to go to a court now to be approved, but we could be on the cusp of something very, very big here once it gets approved, assuming it will. And we're going to talk about that on this show. I'm going to give you my thoughts on it, go over some of the details as released by Ross Dellinger. And we're just going to talk about how it can impact schools like mine, the West Virginia Mountaineers, and other schools like them, and how it can impact smaller schools as well. And even some of the, the quote unquote haves in college football, like the Alabamas, the Georgias, the Texases, the Ohio States, those institutions. I thank you all for coming in today to this live edition on this Saturday midday live stream here about 12:34 p.m. Sorry I was a touch late. Had to grab me a bottle of water to get ready because I'm dealing with some acid reflux or something going on today. But anyway, appreciate everybody hopping in here. I'm looking forward to this show. Before we get started, though, I want to give a quick shout out to my channel sponsor here. So I'll be back here in about 40 seconds. Since 1931, the attorneys at Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner have been the voice for victims who have suffered serious injury or death. They have a fierce passion for truth and justice and a sincere compassion for those who have been wronged by others. Whether you have been in a car accident or fighting with an insurance company, or you or a loved one has suffered serious injury or death due to medical negligence, we will ensure your voice is heard loud and clear. Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner will ensure there is justice for all West Virginians because we are your lawyer, your voice. Visit us at yourlawyeryourvoice.com. Thank you for being patient. Let me get through the housekeeping there. And the good folks over at Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner are helping me keep the lights on here at Couz's Corner, so I have to give them a shout out. Thanks for those who are in the house already. Gamecock Chuck, Thy Will Be Done, Trevor Ross, Immaculate, Daniel Gigax, who's a VIP member here on Couz's Corner. You see the badge there beside his name. You can be a member as well by hitting the join button below or going over to my channel homepage, clicking join beside my profile picture. But anyway, let's get into the content. And by the way, later in the show, after we talk about the house settlement stuff, I'm going to go over and do a little preview, fall camp preview for my West Virginia Mountaineers. I cannot wait to start talking football again. I'm so excited about this season. Just can't wait to get started. Can't wait to talk actually about on the field stuff. Going to have a lot more content to come with my new partner, Jonathan Martin. We started a new show called Blue and Gold or Gold and Blue Breakdown. Can't wait to bring you more of that content. And also want to get real quick, this house settlement stuff that we're getting ready to talk about. The timing is good for me because the announcement of this stuff is good for me. The timing of the announcement is good for me because I'm actually scheduled to interview Ren Baker next week. I'm going privileged to have Ren Baker on the show. I'm going to ask him some questions, and I'm definitely going to bring up this topic, especially about the roster piece, the increase in scholarships for every sport and things like that, and how it can impact a school like West Virginia. Does he like it? Does he not like it? I can't wait to get his thoughts on it. But so be on the lookout for that. I'll be doing the interview early in the week. Not sure. It'll probably be released on either late Tuesday or maybe Wednesday of next week. So be on the lookout for that. It will be a pre-recorded interview. But anyway, also have more VIP members in the house. PW Riggs. Thank you, PW Riggs, for stopping in and joining the show. All right. Yeah, an NFL camp started today as well. But thanks to Daniel for pointing that out. And the Cleveland Browns are actually practicing at the Greenbrier Resort, not too far from me, about an hour and a half up the road. Anyway, the house settlement. Let's talk about it real quick. I'm going to do a screen share here. Pull up Ross Dellinger's Twitter account. The first tweet he put out, let's see, let me go down here. All right, here's the first one. let me go full screen here so I can actually read what I'm looking at. It says the settlement does address the potential. Oh, here we go. Now let me hold on. Man, there's a lot more. All right, it says an important note in the settlement: not defendants, schools and conferences in G5, FCS, etc., are bound by the roster limits, reporting system, and enforcement mechanism only if they choose to share revenue with athletes. They can't opt out. The new enforcement mechanism, there's a lot here. There's an enforcement mechanism to oversee NIL and how NIL is actually conducted. They're wanting to get back to true NIL. So there are some strict rules around that, which we'll touch on. Obviously, the biggest headline of this, when we first heard about this House settlement, was the fact that past athletes are going to get back pay for NIL money that they were not able to participate in. The estimates are, 20 to 30 million per school, somewhere in that neighborhood, I think. And there's a piece in there where current or future college student athletes will get revenue sharing from the universities themselves. And the estimates are anywhere between 20 to 25 million right now. It can increase as revenue increases for these schools and these conferences. Schools can opt out of this, but if you opt in, you have to opt into the whole thing, including the revenue sharing, including the NIL rules, including the scholarship, which we'll talk about in a minute, the scholarship limits, the scholarship caps, all that stuff. They have to opt into the whole thing or not at all. Now, they don't have to opt into paying the full amount. They could choose to pay less on the revenue sharing. They just can't pay. They can't go over the max, which sounds good on the surface, but there are a lot of things about this that have me a little bit concerned. Okay. First, let's talk about the enforcement mechanism. Okay. Because of the revenue sharing now, schools and conferences are trying to get away, and the NCAA are trying to get away from this chaos around NIL and pay for play, right? They're paying student athletes to come basically just for being there. Some of them are not being made to do anything. It's getting away from what true NIL was supposed to be. You get paid for your name, image, and likeness. You do commercials. You do appearances on podcasts. You do, community service, whatever. You advertise, whatever it is. And then the companies, the boosters, or it's supposed to be companies actually, will pay you for that. We have NIL collectives now who are helping with that. Those are legal if done properly. But there are a lot of, but it's turned into chaos and it's turned into pay for play, recruitment inducements, things like that. They're trying to get away from that now that there is a true revenue sharing model. But here's what Ross Dellinger had to say. It says, this new enforcement mechanism prohibiting booster NIL deals that are not deemed authentic is nothing new. This emerged in the short-term settlement, dove into it back in May regarding the evolution of collectives. It says, the purpose and intent of such rule is to ensure that student athletes have the ability to terminate and or modify a proposed executed NIL agreement. But basically, my understanding of this new enforcement arm is they're not allowed to do any NIL deal. If I read this properly, any NIL deal that exceeds $600, excuse me, any NIL deal that exceeds $600 has to be approved by a clearinghouse, an NCAA clearinghouse. And if it's not approved, and if someone goes through with an NIL deal that's not approved by the clearinghouse, then there can be a punishment that gets handed down to the student athlete and or the university, is my understanding. So they're trying to wipe out these big, massive NIL deals. I saw a picture today, somebody posted on X, of Kansas State quarterback Avery Johnson driving around in a lavender sports car. I think it's a Corvette. Maybe, may not be a Corvette. Anyway, it was a lavender sports car, very expensive car, very nice car. We may not see a lot of that stuff going on in the future because they're trying to limit these NIL deals and stick to the revenue sharing piece. So a lot of people are saying we could see, NIL collectives go away. I don't think they'll go away. I think a lot of schools may bring them in-house and have them as part of their athletic departments. Will be basically the marketing arm to handle the revenue sharing piece and to manage NIL deals. There are going to be NIL deals still. They just have to be approved first, right? And maybe the NIL collectives can still manage those and try to make sure everything's done above board and within the limits, legal limits. So that's one part of it. Okay. And that's the part that I think I'm also going to be interested to hear from Ren Baker if we get to it, whether or not, what their plans are for Country Roads Trust. Will Country Roads Trust be brought in house, and how is this going to affect NIL deals going forward? But these the big name athletes like the Avery Johnsons of the world, like the Shador Sanders of the world, in West Virginia's case, Garrett Greens of the world, people like that. There's still going to be a market for those people to do NIL deals. But they're going to have to be more careful about, assuming this all gets approved, they're going to have to be more careful about who they do deals with, how big the deals are. What I think will happen is you'll see a lot more smaller NIL deals. You'll see more of these $500, $600 NIL deals versus the massive NIL deals worth thousands of dollars. So I think they're trying to get down to the actual true purpose of NIL when they first introduced it. That's what I think. Let me see what you guys think in the comment section about the NIL piece. If any of you have any comments on that, I see none. So let's keep going. By the way, for those, thank you, WVU Earl, who's also a VIP member. Thank you for jumping in, man. For those of you watching over on X, I appreciate you. Be sure to come over to my YouTube channel at Couz's Corner. If you want to see past episodes, if you want to see the on-demand episodes I've already done and uploaded, you can check them out over on my YouTube channel. And please subscribe while you're there. Please help me trying to get to 10,000 subscribers. I have a very lofty goal of getting there by the end of the calendar year. Probably not going to happen, but it's definitely a stretch goal I have. But anyway, let's get back to the show. When you look at the next part we're going to talk about is back damages, the back pay. Plaintiffs' attorneys released estimates on how they plan to distribute $2.77 billion in back damages to athletes who played in 2016 to now. Roughly 83% of the money, or $2.3 billion, will go to football and men's basketball. Averages $120,000 per player over 10 years, or $12,000 a year. So, yeah, the back damage money, 83%, and it's my understanding, and I could be wrong, but it's my understanding that that's going mainly to Power 4 schools. I'm not sure if it's going to, or at least the majority of it is going to Power 4 schools. Or the Power 4 schools are going to be required to pay. I'm not sure. Here we go. This answers the question. All current and former college athletes who have received full grant and aid scholarships and compete on or competed on a Division I men's basketball team or an FBS football team at a college or university that is a member of one of the Power 5 conferences, including Notre Dame, at any time between June 5th, 2016 and the date of the class certification order in this matter. So it is only going to be, looks like the Power 4 schools are the only ones going to be impacted by this back pay. So that's why all these Power 4 schools are scrambling to try to figure out how they're going to afford this. Your schools like basically all your Big 12 schools, for the most part, all your ACC schools, and probably even your next tier, middle and lower tier SEC and Big 10 schools are probably scrambling to figure out how they're going to pay for this stuff. Now, the Big 10 and SEC schools are going to have a much easier time of it because they're going to have a lot more revenue coming in starting Big 10 already does. And the SEC will get that major revenue, I think, starting this year with their new TV deal with ESPN. But anyway, go to Ross Dellinger's Twitter account. He breaks it all down there. And, of course, he does it in the article as well. Next is I want to get to the roster limits in a minute. Let's talk about collective bargaining. Now, collective bargaining is one thing. There was no collective bargaining in this. They did not collective bargain this agreement with the student athletes, which is one thing some attorneys out there have an issue with. Collective bargaining is still on the table. There is still an option for athletes and schools or conferences to do collective bargaining. But if they do collective bargaining, according to Ross Dellinger, this settlement would be terminated or could be terminated. So, yes, there are alternative structures like collective bargaining can be put in place in the future, but if they do, then it will basically wipe out the settlement agreement. So basically this is the NCAA and the Power Conference's attempt to get away, in my opinion, from collective bargaining, to get away from athlete employment. They're trying to give back some to the athletes, give them revenue sharing, give them a chance at more scholarships, things like that, in order to prevent having to make them full-fledged employees and collectively bargain. Will this fly? We will see. Mitt Winter, who's a sports attorney over who follows this stuff, he put out on X, he doesn't think it's going to. He thinks there will be more lawsuits down the road when some of the student athletes come in the future who may not have signed on to this or may not have been represented by these attorneys who are doing this deal. They may not be happy with this and they may sue in the future. But collective bargaining is still an option down the road. Here now, let's look at the revenue sharing cap. It can increase over time. Here's the revenue sharing cap. This is, again, Ross Dallinger. Here's the revenue sharing cap estimates from the plaintiff's economic expert. Again, these are only estimates and will likely change, but it's interesting. Year 1 at $23.1 million and escalating to nearly $33 million in year 10. As you see here, 70 Power 5 schools starting in academic year 25-26. It's believed the total Power 5 revenue pool is about $7.355 million. Power 5 payment cap is at $1.6 million, which is $23.1 million per school. So that's in 25-26. And as you can see, as revenues increase, so does the per school payout, and it goes all the way up to $32.9 million in the 10th year of this deal. Now, again, these are estimates. This is nothing set in stone. These are just estimates. So for a school like West Virginia is going to have to pay out, starting in 25-26, about $23.1 million to its student athletes in revenue sharing. Where in the world is that money going to come from? They can take it from their media deal, which is their primary media deal, which is 31.7. Boom. That leaves you $8 million. Yes, you get college football playoff money. That is going to increase over time. But man, they're going to these universities are going to have to find creative ways to bring in a lot more revenue, because I just don't know how they're going to afford it. How do you stay competitive? How do you pay out this revenue sharing and still stay competitive? It's going to be a challenge, especially with schools that don't have these major donors and major boosters out there like some of the bigger institutions do. It's going to be a challenge to me. Is this a case where we're going to see the rich getting richer here? Or do you think the revenue sharing cap will actually help the schools like a West Virginia, like the schools in the Big 12 and the ACC? Will it help them stay more competitive? I'm still trying to wrap my head around all this and figure out where I come into play. At first, I thought maybe this would actually make it more competitive, but I just don't see how, because with all this extra money that the Big Ten and SEC are going to be making, they can use it for other things like hiring more coaches, paying for more scholarships, which I'll get to in a minute, all of that, improving their facilities, whereas the Big 12, the ACC, may not be able to put forth all that money on extra coaches. They won't be able to pay their coaches as high, their coaching salaries as much. They won't be able to invest in facilities like they have in the past, things like that, because it's all going to have to go towards revenue sharing now. That's my concern. Now, let's talk to the one that I think is the most, I don't want to say controversial, but the most surprising to me, and that's the scholarship limits. I'm going to do another screen share. First, let me see what comments we got on this. Daniel Gigak says, the reason why the NIL suit was filed was to have athletes do endorsements. For a college to not approve one might put it back in court. Look at all the commercials Clark did the past year. Exactly. And that's what Mitt Winter, the attorney I mentioned, that's what he's trying to say. You've got to let these, especially these athletes who are in high demand and who businesses want to do deals with. And I went back and listened to the College Football Inquirer podcast last night, the emergency episode they did over on Yahoo Sports and their YouTube channel, where Dan Wetzel and Ross Dellinger were talking about this. And they made a great point. Could we see the return of bagmen in college sports now? Right now, most of your donors and boosters are doing deals with athletes, and they're just calling it NIL, and it's legal. Well, now, if they have to go through this red tape and all this NCAA clearinghouse approval or whatever, that's just going to it's just going to hold, delay things and make it harder to do deals. They'll just start handing players bags of cash again, so that they don't have to go through this rigmarole, and so they can do the $2,000, the $3,000, the $10,000, the $100,000 deals again, or $1 million deals even in some cases. They'll just hand them a bag of cash behind this. So to me, this could be opening the door to going back to the old way of doing things. I just don't know if this is really helping us much here. So Danny, you make a great point, man. Because it's not, and you're right, it's not collective bargaining. You're absolutely right. There may be some athletes who aren't on board with this. The wild, wild west that Doug Hurst mentioned there, that they're trying to get away from that. But to me, I'm not sure it's helping. I really don't. I really don't know if it's helping. Roundabout, if you want to catch up with what I've said, all you have to do is go to the live stream that I'm on now and basically just take and rewind it all the way back to the beginning, and you can catch up. You can do that while I'm still live. At least I think you can. I know I do it all the time when watching shows on my iPhone. Not sure you can do it on every device, but I know the iPhone allows you to do that. So you just rewind to the beginning, or if you want to wait till it's over, it'll be uploaded as an on-demand video. You can just go catch it then as well. Catch the beginning of it then. Pennsylvania Mountaineer says, so WVU cuts programs because they're losing money, yet they'll have to come up with money they don't have. Will this be strictly on the athletic side or the university as a whole? It's on the athletic side. West Virginia, and I think most schools do this, it's my understanding that West Virginia's athletic department is a whole separate entity than the university. That university does subsidize slightly the athletic department, I think to the tune of about 8%, which is actually much lower than a lot of other schools. But at the end of the day, the athletic department kind of stands on its own, and I don't see that changing anytime in the near future. So yes, it's not necessarily on the university as a whole. It's on the athletic department. I think this is a big reason they brought Ren Baker in, to be honest with you. They saw this stuff coming down the pipeline. He has been very successful over the course of his career at fundraising at his past stops. He can bring in money to programs. He embraces NIL more so than the previous AD did. He allows coaches to market NIL, advertise for NIL. They can't necessarily handle the money and do deals directly. Well, at least they couldn't. But they were at least able to be involved in it, help raise money for it, help promote it, things like that. Shane Lyons, I don't think, was allowing that to happen. Ren Baker is. And, again, he's also very good at, building relationships with donors, raising money, those types of things. And I think in today's climate, especially with this new settlement, that's going to be even more important than ever before. Doug Hurst says he'd like to see the NFL model. Yeah, very well could. A lot of people seem to have share that same opinion. Just go to the NFL model and, make everything more equitable, so to speak. And I think that's what they're actually trying to do here. I'm just not sure if it's going to work. Not the NFL model, but more equitable. I think in their head, if every institution has the same revenue cap, then it'll be, put everybody on a more level playing field. But again, as long as NIL is out there, which it's not going away completely, the other programs and the other donors at these major schools are still going to be able to donate more money, do more NIL deals. And again, like I said, pay coaches more, invest in better facilities, all the above. Because school's going to have to cut somewhere. You may not build that brand new football facility. You may not build that brand new whatever it is now, because you have to invest more money into the actual student athletes directly, right? So I think we won't see the massive spending we've seen on facilities over the last few decades. May not see it to the same degree we've seen in the past. Look at schools like USF, who's a G5 school now. It'll be interesting to see if they go through with their planned upgrade to their facilities, because they're going to be impacted by this too. Even though a lot of the smaller schools weren't really on board with this, unfortunately, they're still stuck having to deal with it because the NCAA has to pay out money. And where does that money come from? It comes from the NCAA institutions. The non-Power 4 schools are going to take a big hit with this. So anyway, now they could opt out, but then you can't recruit at the same level. If you're a recruit and you're getting recruited by one school who's opted into the revenue sharing, one who is not, which school are you going to pick? You're going to pick the school who's opted in, right, and who can pay you that part of that $23 million a year. But yes, cutting sports is probably going to happen at some schools. It'll likely be men's sports because they still haven't wrapped their head around the whole Title IX issue now. Title IX has still not been decided. Title IX is not addressed in this settlement, as far as I can tell. So it's going to be up to each individual school to determine how they handle Title IX, because you risk getting into a lawsuit there. If you start cutting women's sports, then boom, all of a sudden you get a lawsuit because you just cut women's sports and you don't have as many women playing sports, or if you don't pay your female athletes as much, right? So we could start seeing men's sports, for example, like, I don't know, for schools who have men's track and field, you could see that getting cut. You might, sports that aren't bringing in revenue might get cut, and they might move them over to club sports instead of being NCAA sanctioned sports. So, so yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. But let's talk about the scholarship limits now, because this is really the most interesting and shocking piece of this whole thing, because I'm not sure if anybody knew this was going to happen. But here's Ross put this out on Twitter. I don't know if you guys can see this or not. Let me try to enlarge it, make it easier to see. Maybe that helps. Maybe it doesn't. But anyway, basically, just for an example, for those who may not be able to see it, baseball, for example. Baseball had 11.7 scholarships to disperse to 34 players, essentially, right? You could have 34 players on a baseball team. I think it was the number, but you can only give out 11.7 scholarships. So they gave out a lot of partial scholarships in baseball, right? Well, now you're going to be able to give out a scholarship to every single player on our baseball team, 34 players, right? It's a lot more money the university is going to be on the hook for on scholarships. And again, if you want to be competitive in baseball, you're going to have to get to that 34 number, or at least come close. Now, you don't have to, well, I'll talk about that in a minute. I don't want to get too far ahead. In basketball, it's not changing a whole lot. Men's basketball is going to go from 13 scholarships to 15. Women's basketball is actually staying the same. It was already at 15. All these different sports. You see fencing, men's fencing, for example, for the schools who have that, they can go from giving out 4.5 scholarships to 24 scholarships. Let's look at football. Right now, a football team can have up to 125 players on a team, right? But you can only have 85 scholarships. They're reducing the roster limit to 105. You can only have 105 players on your team now, but you can pay all 105 of those players a scholarship. So, for example, West Virginia has 125 guys on the team, only paying 85 of them scholarships. They're going to have to cut 20 players off that roster. It'll probably be all walk-ons, right? And they're going to have to pay 20 more scholarships. I don't know what's tuition at West Virginia. I don't know. Let's just throw out a number, $5,000 a semester. And that doesn't count room and board, by the way. Let's just throw out a round number, $10,000 a semester. Let's say a student athlete's paying $10,000 a semester to attend WVU. That includes room and board. That includes tuition, everything, right? $10,000 a semester. It's $20,000 a year, right? And again, I don't know if that's an accurate number. I'm just throwing out something easy to work with. Times 20,000 a year, about 20 athletes. What's that give you? $400,000 a year now in additional scholarship money you're going to have to pay just for your football team. Doesn't count your baseball team. Doesn't count your men's basketball. I mean, it's only 2 more in men's basketball, but you get my point. Doesn't include women's volleyball, who's getting a scholarship increase of 6. Wrestling, who's going from 9.9 to 30. Now, West Virginia doesn't have a women's softball team now. For those of you who have been wanting West Virginia to add a women's softball team, you can pretty much mark that off your list. There's no way they're going to be able to afford to add a softball team with all these other additional expenses coming down the pipeline. It doesn't make any sense. It's unfortunate because I think West Virginia fans would support it. But I mean, to get something like that off the ground is going to cost a lot of money. Plus, you'd have to pay the student athletes a scholarship. How can you afford to do that now? Because in order to compete in football, you're going to have to pay an additional $400,000. And again, it's a round total guesstimate. You're going to have to pay an additional, 6 figures a year just in scholarships for football. Because you have to be competitive in football because that's your primary revenue driver. And if you're not competitive in that, then it affects all the other sports anyway, right? So this is where it comes back to, will the rich get richer? Will the rich get richer? Because, and one thing Ross Dellinger pointed out, and Dan Wessel, and I'm not sure if I agree with this, but Dan Wessel was talking about how, right now, Alabama can only get 85 scholarship players, and I'm using Alabama as an example. So a lot of players who might have went to Alabama couldn't because they could not get offered a scholarship, so they'd go somewhere else. Well, now Alabama's going to be able to play that football player a scholarship. So he might stay at Alabama, right? So is Alabama, Ohio State, Texas, are the blue blood schools going to just load up with 105 4- and 5-star guys and have them all on scholarship, and there'll be less of those players to go to the other schools? It's interesting. Now, I personally don't see that happening because players are still going to want playing time. They still want to play. They still want to see the field or the court. So to me, you're still going to see players like a West Virginia, basically take any team in the Big 12, most of your ACC teams, even your lower level SEC or lower tiered SEC and Big 10 teams. If they load up on all the 4- and 5-star guys, a lot of those 4- and 5-star guys aren't going to get any playing time. So, and they'll know that. So they're going to want to go to a school where they can play. And also the transfer portal comes into play here. They can now transfer as many times as they want to. So if you go to an Alabama and you're not getting playing time and you're a 4-star kid, you may decide, I want to transfer to West Virginia, or I want to transfer to UCF, or I want to transfer to Minnesota or Ole Miss or wherever. Just throw out of school. I want to transfer to one of those schools because I'll get more playing time there instead of being stuck on as a third stringer here at Alabama or Georgia or Ohio State. So I don't think it's going to hurt competitiveness that much as far as getting players on your roster. I just think it's going to hurt. It's the financial piece that concerns me here. If West Virginia and these other schools are going to have to pay 6 figures a year on additional scholarships, actually, it'll be more than that. Once you add in all the sports, it'll probably be 7 figures or 6 figures, probably 7 figures a year, if not 8 in additional scholarships, right? If they have to spend that money, again, it's less they can pay their coaches. It's less they can spend on facilities. It might be less they can spend on recruiting. So I can't wait to talk to Ren Baker and get his thoughts on this and how this could impact West Virginia specifically. And I find this, and who I think is going to get hurt the most by this are the smaller schools. The G5 schools will probably have less players on their rosters now. They won't have less players, but they'll have less. Their chances of getting a top recruit are going to dwindle even more now. And who's it going to affect even more? Even your smaller schools, your D2 schools, your NAIA schools, Division III schools. There are going to be less players available to those teams now, it seems to me. Now, you tell me if I'm wrong in the comments. Maybe I'm looking at this wrong, but I just don't see. To me, those are the schools that are going to get impacted by this the most are your smaller schools. Again, your FCS schools, even your G5s. There are going to be less players available or less high caliber players available to those schools now because they're going to be on the Power 5 teams because they can now field more scholarships, right? So I don't know. Maybe I'm looking at this the wrong way. Maybe this is actually a good thing. I don't know. You tell me if it is. Tell me if it is. If you want to make sure you get your comment read on air, guys, you drop a super chat. You see the chat box below. There's a $ beside it. If you hit the $, put in the amount you want to donate, put in your comment, hit send. It'll highlight it for me, puts it over in a separate box where I see it. I will read it. You can answer take the conversation whichever direction you want it to go. Got one. First one came in right now. Mark Bowman. Thank you for the $10 super chat. And by the way, that's only for YouTube. I'm not sure that's available on X. But anyway, those of you watching on X, I appreciate you as well. Mark Bowman with a $10 donation. He says Iowa predicts $150 million in athletic department income for 2025. Iowa State $114 million. Is this typical for Big 10 versus Big 12 schools? Does Big 12 use private capital make up the difference? It is typical, and it will be typical going forward, Mark. You bring up a great point. So if I was bringing $150 million in income, right, for 25, Iowa State's only bringing in 114. Of that one, they both have to pay the same amount out to their student athletes, right? Theoretically, based on this settlement, they'll have to pay the same amount out to their student athletes. They'll have to pay the same amount out in the back for the back pay part of this settlement. The same amount out for scholarships if they want to be competitive in football, right? They're both going to have to pay 105 scholarships. Now, some of it may come down to cost of scholarships. How much does a scholarship cost at Iowa versus Iowa State? I don't know the answer to that. So that could definitely, if it costs more to go to Iowa, then maybe Iowa State makes it up there a little bit. But point being, if you're a coach, Iowa's going to be able to pay you more money. If you're an assistant coach, Iowa's going to be able to pay you more money. Right? So it's going to be hard. I mean, we've already seen it, right? We've already seen coaches leaving to go to the more of the Big 12 ACC coaches leaving to go to Big 10 and SEC schools. It's already started. I think that will increase. It'll be harder for Big 12 and ACC schools to keep their coaches long term. And then, again, facilities. Money spent on recruiting, money spent on travel. When you got these schools who are traveling across the country to games or halfway across the country in West Virginia's case to play games, you're going to have to be more creative with how you spend money on travel. And they're going to have to be really, really detailed and pay really close attention on where their money goes and how they spend it. Every penny is going to be scrutinized now. I mean, it probably was before, but even more so now. Every dime has to be accounted for. Every dime they have to be smart with their money. And they have to find every way possible to bring in revenue, which brings up your point about private equity, private capital. This may push the Big 12 towards that conversation even more now. Maybe the Big 12 presidents will now embrace private capital more than they might have before. Now, I don't necessarily think that's the case because they've all known this was coming, and the conversation have been ongoing about this for months, if not years. I'm sure they probably already had an idea what the numbers were, and they still so far haven't embraced it totally because of the things that it comes with. But I think the first thing you're going to start seeing, Mark, is probably schools start dropping athletic departments. They're going to start dropping sports. Daniel Gigax brings up tumbling. Tumbling teams are going to be lit, he says. Schools that have tumbling. It'll be hard. Again, it may be hard to cut female sports because of the Title IX rules. But do you cut men's cross country or men's track or men's wrestling? Whatever. Do you start seeing those sports get cut? And you make them all club sports where you don't pay out any scholarships, or do you just pay less scholarships in certain sports and more to others? There's going to be a lot of conversations behind the scenes at these institutions on what they actually pay for and what they don't pay for. That's because you can't afford not to be competitive in football and men's basketball. You have to be competitive in those two sports in order to keep the other sports afloat. Appalachia Africa Twin, thank you for the $5 super chat. He says, speaking of budgets, here's some Starbucks money for you, Couz. Appalachia Africa Twin, thank you. Thank you for the support. Thank you for the $5 donation. And I don't know if it'll be Starbucks, but I can spend it somewhere for sure. I appreciate that. It means a lot, my man. Again, you guys can drop a super chat if you feel like it. One way you can support this show free, guys, and then I'm going to move into talking some West Virginia football. But one thing you can do to support me for free, hit the thumbs up button. If you're watching this on your iPhone, all you have to do is hit the X where the live chat is. Hit the X. It closes out your live chat. Go hit that thumbs up button. Like it real quick. And then, boom, hit the live chat box again. It pulls it right back up. It only takes you a couple seconds, and you can rejoin the chat. But that really helps me out. It'll push this live video out to more people and helps the algorithm And it's free. It doesn't cost you a thing but a few seconds of your time. Had a comment I want to address here. WVU football going deep says dropping the total roster to 105 means 15 players now on rosters won't be there next year. Exactly. Those are probably going to be walk-ons who will go down a level and may or may not get scholarships. So what this is going to do is cut out the opportunity for more players to play at the Power 5 level. But it'll be your lower recruited guys, your less recruited guys, your walk-ons. Now, maybe it'll be a good thing. Maybe they can go get scholarships now at other schools. It'll be interesting to see how it goes. I'm kind of looking at this as a glass half empty approach. Maybe there's a glass half full side of this that I'm just not seeing. Maybe there's more parity in college football now. Maybe there's more competitive balance. I don't know. Maybe there's something I'm missing here that I'm not seeing, and I'm leaning on you guys to try to help me out with that. He also says, digging in more before I do a video, but schools like WVU likely won't use all the scholarships. Might move up to about 95 and still have 10 walk-ons. And that's an option too. That'll be an option, but I fear if they do that, it's going to hurt them in recruiting. I think so, but maybe not. I don't know. I'm going to leave that up to the coaches to figure out. I wish I could get Neil Brown on to ask him about it, but so far I'm striking out on that. But anyway, I have made attempts. But I'm blessed to be able to get Ren on the show, and I can't wait to ask him about it. Hudson Clement was a walk-on, perfect example. But West Virginia may not be going forward. West Virginia may not be able to get the Hudson Clements of the world. He'll go somewhere else, right? So I don't know. We'll see. Nebraska Rascal says Nebraska's roster is at 150 right now. This killed our walk-on program. Wow. Interesting stuff. All right. Let's move over and talk a little bit of West Virginia Mountaineer football. Fall camp is in the air, baby. July 31st is when the Mountaineers start fall camp. So let's talk a little Mountaineer football. What do you say? For those of you who aren't West Virginia fans, stick around. You might learn something about the Mountaineers. If you are a Mountaineer fan, hopefully you're excited about finally football is right around the corner. I'm sure Neil Brown will probably talk to the media next week at some point. It's press conference season. I'm looking forward to that. But let me do another quick screen share here. I'm going to bring up the football roster for the 20 depth chart for the 20 preseason depth chart for the 2024 season. This is courtesy of my good friends over at WV Sports Now. As you can see, no ads on the page. Why is that? Because I am a member of the Holler over there. If you want to become a member of the Holler and get access to their ad-free content and their behind-the-scenes content, you can get a discount. Use promo code Couz at checkout. Go to their website, wvsportsnow.com. Go to join the Holler at checkout. Type in Couz, C-O-U-Z. You get a 40% discount on a one-year membership. You get to be a member of the Holler for only $20.99 for 1 full year. Full price, you'd be paying without the Couz code, $34.99. So take advantage of it. But anyway, let's get into the depth chart. Obviously, quarterback, no surprise here. Garrett Green, senior. Nico Marchio, redshirt sophomore, no surprise. The interesting thing here will be who gets the third string spot. Will it be Ryder Burton, the transfer from BYU, or will it be Khalil Wilkins? I would put my money on Ryder Burton, who already has 1 year of experience at a Power 5 program, whereas Khalil Wilkins is coming in as a true freshman and was not able to participate in spring ball. Excuse me. So he's going to be behind the curve a little bit. So I'm giving the edge there to Ryder Burton as a third stringer. We've heard great things about Nico and how he's looked in the spring. So, if Garrett was to go down again this year like he did last year, I think Nico will be able to come in and they won't necessarily miss a beat. They might miss a beat, but it won't be 2 beats or 3 beats. Maybe like they did last year where he may not have been quite ready yet. Now, let's go down to running backs. Again, no surprise. It says Jaheim White or C.J. Donaldson. I'd say we'll see those two guys splitting carries a lot. Don't be surprised if Thompson has a few good games as well this year. He's going to get the rocks on. The Z wide receiver, which is one of your outside guys, Preston Fox or Traylon Ray. Again, both of those guys are going to get a lot of snaps. So I don't put a lot of, I don't really think you can give one guy the edge there over the other one. The H receiver, which is one of your inside receivers, Rodney Gallagher, sophomore, listed as a first stringer. Rick Darius Farmer, a true freshman coming in from the state of Florida. They call him Day-Day. He's listed in the 2 deep, guys, and he just now got there in the summer. and they already have him in the 2 deep. That shows you how talented this young man is. I can't wait to see him in the old gold and blue. The X receiver, which is the other outside receiver, Hudson Clement or Jaden Bray, who's a transfer from Oklahoma State again. Both of those guys are going to get a lot of snaps. So I don't really know that you can give one the edge over the other one. Tight end Cole Taylor and Traylon Davis as a backup. No surprises there. Offensive line, there's no oars on the offensive line. It's going to be Wyatt Milam, left tackle, Tomas Remack, left guard, Brandon Yates at center, Jaquay Herbert at right guard, and Nick Malone at right tackle. Their backups are Johnny Williams, Sully Weedman, Landon Livingston, Nick Cray, Xavier Boston. Now, that can all change. Some of these guys may get beat out at spring and fall camp. Somebody could get injured. You could see a name pop up on the 2 deep that we're not seeing now. Or, heck, who knows? You could see one of these backups perform so well in fall camp that they earn a starting spot. But right now, this is what they're expecting to start on August 31st against Penn State. Let's go to the defensive side of the ball. Probably more questions here than on the offensive side. You've got Sean Martin listed as the defensive end spot. New number for Sean at number 5. And by the way, I forgot to mention the number changes on offense too, guys. You've got Rodney Gallagher has changed from number 2 to number 24. I think that's in case he decides he wants to play some defense. It'll allow him to do that. Hudson Clement, it lists him at number 84 here, but last week we found out he's actually changing his number to number 3. So that's just 2 number changes of note. Sean Martin, before the season, changed his number to 5 to honor his late friend, Tony Webster, who passed away at Bluefield High School a few years back. He and Sean Martin were really close friends, and Sean wanted to honor him, and he's able to do that this year, that he's a senior. I'm expecting big things from Sean Martin this year. He's going to play with a chip on his shoulder. He played banged up a lot last year. He's not banged up now. He's going to be healthy. It's his senior year. He knows he can play himself into a high draft pick spot if he plays well. So I expect Sean Martin to come out and play like a man possessed and have a really big 2024 season. Right behind him, you've got TJ Jackson, very highly touted transfer from from Troy. I expect him to come in and have a good year as well. And I think he'll get a lot of snaps. You've got Tor Simmons as the third guy there. Nose tackle, Fatorma Mulba, the transfer from Penn State who looked good last year, or Hammond Russell. I'm actually surprised to see an or there. That shows me that Hammond Russell looked good in the spring, and he could push Fatorma Mulba for that starting spot. And, of course, you see Nate Gabriel there as the third stringer, or the second stringer, I guess, in this case. Edward Vestorinen at D tackle with Asani Redwood backing him up. Hopefully Asani can be healthy this year, finally. They expect big things from him if he can stay healthy. What used to be the bandit position, now called the spur. Have Tyron Bradley, the senior, listed there with Ty French, the transfer from Gardner-Webb, I think it was, as his backup. But we've heard great things about Ty French. They said he's really fast coming off the ball on that edge. So we may actually see both of those guys on the field at the same time quite a bit this year, I expect. Josiah Trotter listed as a starting weak side linebacker along with an or alongside Ben Cutter. Really high expectations for Josiah Trotter. He likely could have started last year as a true freshman. He's that talented. But unfortunately, an ACL injury took him out for the year. We all know Ben Cutter kind of got thrown to the wolves last year as a true freshman when Trey Lathan went down with an injury. That experience is going to be very valuable for him coming into 2024. But he's listed there as the or, so we don't know which one of those guys will win the starting spot. It's going to be good. There's going to be a lot of competition at his middle linebacker spot. When you look at middle linebacker spot, still you've got Trey Lathan listed there as your starter. No surprise after the year he was having before he went out with an injury last year. He was leading the team in sacks, I believe, or at least he was leading this team in quarterback hurries or one of those categories. Then you've got Caden Beiser or Reed Carrico here. Now, I'm a little surprised here. Caden Beiser apparently has looked really good in the spring because they brought Reed Carrico, the transfer over from Ohio State. They claimed he looked really, really good in spring, but Caden Beiser apparently is pushing him for that backup role. So it's good to see that. Good to see the competition. Aubrey Burks has moved over to the spear position this year. The senior, he said in an interview earlier this year that it's his contract year. He's playing like this is a contract year. He's playing for that NFL contract. He's playing for that draft pick. He wants to get drafted, and he wants to get drafted high. He's going to play well. Also, the fact you see Zay Jennings, a true freshman here in the 2 deep on this list, shows how high they are on him. We heard nothing but great things about him throughout the spring. I expect big things from Zay Jennings. Josiah Jackson, redshirt freshman listed, along with Kokora Tarnu, the transfer redshirt senior from Jacksonville State, listed as one of your starters at the corner. At cat safety, with Israel Boyce there backing them up. But they're very high on Kokora Tarnu, the long, lengthy athletic corner or safety, that they brought over from – that C keeps throwing me off. I keep wanting to say corner. But the long, athletic safety they brought over from Jacksonville State, who played for Coach Rod over there. We all know Coach Rod can coach them up, so that's good. And then Josiah Jackson, the redshirt freshman, I'm glad to see him there. We've heard good things about him and his work throughout the last couple of seasons. And then Anthony Wilson will start at free safety more than likely, the redshirt senior who transferred in last year from either Georgia Southern, I believe it was. It could have been Georgia State, but I think it was Georgia Southern. Jaheim Joseph, the transfer from Northwestern, expected to be his backup. Left corner, we got Aiden Garnes, the redshirt junior from Duquesne, who transferred over, expected to start there. His backup will be TJ Crandall, the transfer from Colorado State, or Jordan Jackson, Josiah Jackson's twin. Again, this is all fluid. This is preseason depth chart. It can all change. Right corner right now is Garnet Hollis, the transfer from Northwestern. Behind him is Jacoby Spells, and behind him is Dantes Fagan. Special teams, you've got Michael Hayes as your kicker, Leighton Bechtel as your holder, Oliver Strawer as your punter, Michael Hayes doing kickoffs, Austin Brinkman, who Phil Steele had listed as first-team All-Big 12 long snapper. I had a gentleman on who works for the East-West Shrine Bowl, actually oversees the East-West Shrine Bowl. He actually says Austin Brinkman might be the best long snapper in the country, and he expects Austin Brinkman to have an NFL career. So shout out to Austin Brinkman, the long snapper. Kick returner, right now they have Hudson Clement and Preston Fox there, and they also have Preston Fox as a punt returner and Rodney Gallagher backing him up. So let me know what you think on the depth chart. Any surprises there on the depth chart? Let me go down and see if we got any more super chats here. No more super chats in the house. Do we have any? Daniel Gigak says, I'm just hoping the receivers don't have as many drops last year. Agreed. I think I read an article that had, if you take away the drops, I think Garrett Green's completion percentage would have been 62% versus 53%. I don't remember where I read that at, but I thought I saw. But again, every team has drops, but West Virginia, hopefully West Virginia receivers can minimize their drops. Jordan Couz, great comment here. And by the way, Jordan Couz is the host of Country Roads webcast. Go check out his channel if you haven't. He's very good at keeping up with the West Virginia Mountaineers roster, any roster changes that may occur. He keeps track of that better, as good as about anyone out there. But Jordan Couz says, still surprised that Justin Robinson isn't currently listed on the 2 deep at receiver. We've got a lot of guys there that will see playing time. Great point, Jordan. I did not even think about that when I was reading through this depth chart. Justin Robinson, the transfer from Mississippi State, is not listed in the 2 deep. Doesn't mean he can't earn a spot in the 2 deep before fall camp's over, but it is interesting nonetheless. He's like 6'3", 6'4", very long, very athletic. So I'm definitely surprised there. Cheers Beers and Mountaineer says he has high hopes for Gallagher this season, was highly recruited and played some great snaps. He always had some freshman jitters, it seemed. If he gets rid of those, he could have a year. Guys, I have got to step away for just 1 second. Pardon me. Got a very important call coming in. Sorry about that. That was my dad calling. I wanted to make sure it wasn't anything important. Anyway, but yeah, Jordan very surprised as well. WVU football alert, or WVU football going deep, says Robinson only signed officially shortly before the media guide came out. I think, which would have made it hard to put him on the depth chart. And that's very possible. WVU Forrest. I want to say Forrest if you don't mind, but go check out his show, WVU Football Going Deep. Jordan says my live is helping him get through his work shift. Well, Jordan, man, I'm glad I can help you, man. Glad I can help you out. The family's not here right now. They're out. The girls are out shopping. I had some free time. I want to get on here and I want to talk West. I've been wanting to talk West Virginia football. There just hadn't been a whole lot to talk about. So I want to get on here and do this. And then also obviously want to give my thoughts on the house settlement stuff too. And WVU Football Going Deep makes a good point. The drops seem to not be an issue after 4 games because they went young there. Kind of changed out the personnel, and that's a great point. Great point. WVU Mountaineer with Kenny has some comments here I want to get to. Let me see. Jordan, as a coach, you don't show your surprises. Oh, he's talking about the Justin Robinson thing. I don't think that's it as much, Kenny. I think it's more or less just like maybe what Forrest had to say, and that's he got added to the team so late they probably just didn't put him on the depth chart. I don't think he's a secret necessarily, but it could be. You never know. Neil's not afraid to do some gamesmanship occasionally, especially for a team like Penn State. David Z's in the house. Thank you for joining the show, David. He says, no, don't talk West Virginia football. Just messing with you, Couz. Yeah, David, appreciate you being in here, my man. Anyway, the key position battles I want to talk about here on this depth chart that I just went over, as I pulled it up again, the key position battles to me where we could see some changes are, again, at running back, you're going to see both of those guys carry the rock, so I'm not sure it really matters. Same with receiver. You're going to see all those guys get reps and catch passes. You could see Xavier Bosley challenge Nick Malone for that starting spot. I think Xavier Bosley is extremely talented. Another transfer from Jacksonville State. He's very talented. Could potentially push Nick Malone for that starting spot there. I think Brandon Yates is solid at center. I think really all the linemen are, maybe with the exception of right tackle. But again, I still think Nick Malone has the edge there because of his experience and the chemistry that he'll have with the other linemen, which is extremely important up front. Defensively, and I'm talking about positions that may not necessarily have an or beside their name here, by the way. Again, I think we'll see Tyron Bradley and Ty French on the field at the same time quite often. Would not be surprised to see Reed Carrico take over that second string spot there behind Trey Latham at linebacker. We've heard glowing things about him. Would not be surprised if Couz Turnu ends up starting because of his length and his athleticism. But again, a lot of times when guys transfer up from a lower level, it takes them a few games to adjust to the speed. We saw it with Anthony Wilson last year. The year before that, we saw it with the transfer kid we had from Colorado State. I can't think of his name off the top of my head. Not last year. I'm sorry, the 2022 season. We saw it take him a year or two to catch up to the speed of the game. But very talented players. But you're used to playing at a certain speed, a certain level of competition, and it takes some time to adjust. Could see that with Couz Turnu. Could also see it with Aiden Garnes, who they have listed here as a starter at left corner. Could see that with Aiden Garnes. Could also see it with TJ Crandall. Hopefully not. But, you could see those guys take some adjustment. Whereas you've got like Garner Hollis, for example, he's coming over from a Power 5 program. Could he be the next Beanie Bishop? I'm not saying he's going to be a consensus All-American, but can he be that guy who really is a stopper at the cornerback spot for West Virginia? I think he has the ability to be. We'll see. He's going to let us know for sure. And again, I also wouldn't be surprised if we see Jaheim Joseph, even if he doesn't beat out Anthony Wilson at that free safety spot. We know that West Virginia likes to move guys around, especially in that defensive secondary. Jaheim Joseph could end up playing one of the other safety spots at some point, or maybe even a corner spot. I think he's a true safety, but it wouldn't be surprised if they move him around a lot. But I do expect Anthony Wilson. I think Anthony Wilson gets overshadowed a little bit. He's so small. He's only like 5'9", but man, he's a really good football player. He's tough. he gets outmatched in coverage at times, and that's something he's going to have to work on. Especially when he has to cover tight ends coming across the middle who are 6'5", 6'6", 6'7". But they can scheme around that, I feel, and I do think he's a really good football player, and I expect him to have he was actually first or second on the team in tackles a year ago. So I expect him to have another big season, an even better season, but hopefully he can shore up his coverage coming into this year. But anyway, that's some key position battles. Some players I expect to step up. I mentioned Sean Martin earlier. I think he's going to have a monster year. I expect Aubrey Burks to have a really good year because, again, he's playing with that chip on his shoulder. I expect Anthony Wilson to have a big year on defense. And up front, I really expect our defense. We're not going to be as deep. West Virginia's not going to be as deep on the defensive line as they were a year ago. But, man, the guys they have, Torma Mulba, Sean Martin, Edward Vestorina, I'm really high on those guys. Edward Vestorina is just a consistently good player. I think he'll take another step up. I'm really high on this defensive line. I think they're going to be extremely good. I think it'll be hard to run the football on this West Virginia D-line. And I've heard some concern from some of the other West Virginia media folks about West Virginia's linebacker position because they're so young and there's not a lot of depth there. If they can stay healthy, if that linebacker core can stay healthy, it's a big if, but if they can stay healthy, I'm really confident with the talent they have there. I think Trey Lathan, now that he's back from injury, I think he's going to have a monster year. It might take him a game or two to get back into the speed of things, but I think he can have a monster year, and I'm really high on him. And I'm really good. I'm really happy with, even though they're young at linebacker for the most part, I'm really happy with the talent. It might be the most talented linebacker core they've had top to bottom in a long time. Offensively, some guys I expect Garrett to have a big year. I think he's going to be one of the most talked about quarterbacks in the country, especially in the Big 12. I expect both running backs. Listen, Jaheim White's kind of been the talk of the town since last year because of how he came on late. Do not sleep on C.J. Donaldson. C.J. Donaldson played last season with a shoulder injury, folks. Almost the entire year he was out with a shoulder, or not out. Almost the whole year he was playing with a bad shoulder. That shoulder has been fixed with surgery. He's back to being healthy again. I think we will see the CJ that we saw in 2022, where he ran the ball like a man possessed. He's going to be hard to tackle. He's going to be a great 1-2 punch with Jaheim. Do not sleep on C.J. Donaldson. He's probably, even though he and C.J. are really close friends, they're also very competitive. And I'm sure C.J.'s tired of hearing about how great Jaheim White is. And he wants to go out and prove that he's great too. And I expect him to have a big year. This West Virginia running game, to me, if the offensive line can hold up and be at least close to as good as last year, I expect this West Virginia running game to be awesome. And I expect, a lot of people are questioning West Virginia's receiving core. I'm not. Yes, they're young. But, man, I'm telling you, Traylon Ray, guys, I don't think people understand. Traylon Ray came in late summer. He didn't just come in the summer. He came in late summer because his high school baseball team made it really far into the postseason. So he was late getting to Morgantown. He still was a starter by the end of the year as a true freshman. And I don't think he even touched his potential last year. I'm really high on Traylon Ray. And he even admitted he was very raw last year. He was very raw as a receiver. He's not going to be as raw now. He's going to be a better route runner. He's going to be a better blocker. We've heard Coach Scott rave about his blocking on the perimeter. He's going to be even better at that this year. I think Rodney Galler's going to take a step up this year. His athleticism is going to show this year. They'll get the ball in his hands more, find creative ways to get him the football. I expect him to have a big year. Hudson Clement's going to be even better this year. Maybe the fastest guy on the offense. Obviously, Jaden Bray from Oklahoma State, very good receiver. I'm really high on this offense, guys, and on this receiving core. I think they're arguably the most underrated receiving core in the Big 12, and I think they're going to show that this year. I think they're going to clean up the drops. I think they're going to they're all going to be better route runners. They're going to be better blockers. I'm really excited about it. Cole Taylor, very, very undervalued tight end. I think he has a potential. There's going to be a couple really good tight ends in the Big 12. Obviously, Brant Keithy with with Utah. And then you've got the young man from Iowa State. Can't think of his name off the top of my head. I think Cole Taylor has a shot to be as good. I think he can be at least the second best tight end in the Big 12. I don't know if he's going to surpass Brent Keithy, but I think he has the opportunity to be at least the second best tight end in the conference. And he could push to be the best. Who knows? But I think I'm really high on Cole Taylor. I think he's going to work his way into to be a draft pick next year. I really do. And of course, the offensive line, I don't really, not much else to say. Biggest question mark, obviously, how much will the loss of Zach Frazier, how much is that going to hurt this offensive line? That's going to be the big question mark. Can Brandon Yates step up and be even close to as good as what Zach Frazier? I'm not saying he won't be as good as Zach Frazier. I'm not saying he will. I don't know that anybody will be as good as Zach Frazier. But can he at least be 3/4 of what Zach Frazier was? Can he be enough to solidify the center of that O-line? I think he can. I felt like he struggled a little bit in the bowl game against North Carolina last year, but we got to remember that was his first game as a starter at that spot. He's had an entire offseason to work there, to get comfortable there, to work on his communication, to being the quarterback of that offensive line, to communicate with Garrett Green. He's had an entire summer in workouts, and he's going to have fall camp. So by the time the season rolls around, I'm confident Brandon Yates will be able to play that center spot again. He's not going to be Zach Frazier. He's probably not even going to be a second. He may not even get drafted. But I think he's going to be a solid enough player there that this offensive line will not take a massive step back from losing Zach. There may be things they can't do that they did a year ago, but I think Neil Brown and the offensive staff are good enough to scheme around that and you really utilize their strength, which is going to be the left side of that line. I mean, Tomas Remak, Phil still had Tomas Remak as a second-team All-Big 12 guard. He's a very talented player. Wyatt Milam, projected to be potentially a very high first-round draft pick, potentially one of the best tackles in the country. The left side of that O-line is going to be absolutely dynamic. That's the part of the offensive line they're going to take advantage of and scheme for, right? Now, the other teams know that, so they're going to try to scheme up that too, but I still have faith in Neil Brown as a play caller to take advantage of those strengths there. And again, so anyway, let me know what positions do you think guys are going to step up at this year and really make strides at? I got another super chat I want to address. Appalachia Africa Twin, thank you for the $10 donation. He says, Couz, we got murdered in the secondary last year. Do you feel we improved enough this year to get some key stops and maybe get a close win or two throughout the year with the changes there? Yes. The safeties were most of the issue last year in coverage. They went out and addressed that by bringing in because I actually, we all know the good job Beanie Bishop did. And I felt like Malachi Ruffin was pretty solid too. The problem was there was nobody behind those guys on the depth chart that when they brought other guys in the game, they took a massive step back and those guys were just getting worn down. But the safety spot to me was the weak point of the team last year in pass coverage. Anthony Wilson's got another year, got a whole season now under his belt playing at the Power 5 level. That's going to help. Obviously, Aubrey Burks will be back and 100% healthy. That's going to help. They brought in Kokora Tarnu from Jacksonville State. I think he's 6'1", very long, very athletic. That's going to help. West Virginia's been undersized a lot in the secondary, really ever since Neil Brown's gotten there. They're addressing that now. They have addressed that through the portal. They now have guys with long arms. They have guys who can run. So when they do get beat on occasion, they're able to make up ground with their length and their athleticism. The guys they've had in the past have been 5'10", 5'11", 6 foot at the most. Harder to make up ground when you're shorter. You have shorter limbs, and maybe you're not quite as athletic. They're bringing in guys who now are not going to take a back seat in the athleticism department and aren't going to take a back seat from a length department either. And I like that. So I think they've addressed it with Tarnu. I think they've been playing Garnes at some safety spots. We could see him play safety some potentially. Obviously, Josiah Jackson apparently is coming on really well throughout the offseason. So I do listen. It's still a question mark. I'm not going to lie. There is a lot of questions in the secondary. Again, can the transfers? How long will it take them to adjust to the higher level of football? Back in 2022, they went out and got some guys from the lower levels. Those guys didn't pan out for the most part, especially at corner. We remember that. I don't remember one was Wesley McCormick. Don't remember the other one's name, but they brought in. I think his last name was Ajayi. Those guys did not perform well, in my opinion. Can the guys they brought in this year from lower levels, can they perform well? It's what I like about it, though. West Virginia didn't have Drew Fabianich in the athletic department and in the program then. Drew Fabianich is a former NFL scout. He knows talent. He knows what guys to go after in the portal, and that's what he specializes in. He's scouting the transfer portal to help bring guys in, and he's now pinpointing guys who he thinks will fit and are good enough to play at the Power 5 level. I think that is a huge X factor now that West Virginia didn't have 2 years ago. I think now that he's there, I think the guys they're going to bring in now will be better than the guys they were bringing in 2 years ago. So I am confident they'll be better. Are they going to be a top half of the Big 12 secondary? I don't think so. But I do think, but here's another thing we got to keep in mind, Appalachia Africa Twin. I shouldn't say top half. They can be top half of the league. I don't think they can be top, I don't think they're going to be a top 5 necessarily secondary. But what I do like, if they go to, they brought in Victor Cabral to help with the outside linebackers. He's going to coach them up on rushing the passer. If they can get to the quarterback more, create more chaos without having to rush their middle linebackers and without having to rush safeties as much, that's going to help a lot. That's one thing. West Virginia had a lot of sacks last year, but they were doing it mostly with linebackers and safeties. If Sean Martin can get to the quarterback more, if Edward Vestorinen can get to the quarterback more, if Ty French can come off the edge as good as they say he can, if Tyron Bradley improves in that area even more this year, they won't have to rely as much on the Trey Lathans, on the Aubrey Burkses of the world. They won't have to rely as much on those guys. Yes, they can blitz those guys in packages and on occasion to keep the defense or keep the offense guessing, but they won't have to do it as much. Those guys can stay back in coverage, and that'll help the secondary even more. So I think you got to look at more than just the secondary. You got to look at how can they rush the quarterback? How can they put pressure on the quarterback to help the secondary? If you leave the secondary out on an island and they have to cover these Power 5 level receivers for 4 and 5 seconds, not many guys are going to be able to do that. Okay. But if you don't have to cover them for 2 seconds, you can do it. That's going to be a big factor this year too. How much pressure can they get on the quarterback is going to really help. So to answer your question, Appalachia, I do think they can. And I do think that will help them win more of those close games. And there are going to be a lot of close games. The Big 12 is going to be a league with a lot of parity. There's going to be a lot of close games, a lot of tight games. And I do think they can make enough stops to win some of those this year. Kenny says he really likes the 2 corners that came from Northwestern. They have length and they know Penn State. They played against him last year. Great point. Great point. I hadn't even thought about the Penn State angle there. WVU Football Going Deep says Taylor will leave a cold tattoo on defense. I like that. That's funny. Talking about Cole Taylor. I'm really looking forward to Cole Taylor. I think he has a chance to be the best tight end West Virginia's had since Trayvon Wesco. And maybe even better than Trayvon Wesco at the end of the day. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. What are you guys looking for going into this football season for WVU? What are the position battles you're looking at? What are some of the players you expect to step up? I'd like to hear your thoughts on it as well. Cheers Beers Mountaineer says, how much pressure on the QB and how well we can stop the run? I think we stop the run and force teams to pass. Any safety can be decent when they know exactly where it's going. Great point. Great point, Cheers Beers Mountaineers. Here's the challenge, though, with that statement, and I don't disagree with it necessarily, but here's what's going to make it difficult. Have you looked at the running back rooms that West Virginia is going to be facing this year? Kansas has not only Devin Neal. By the way, they also have a guy named, what is his name? Daggone it. Not Giddens. Dick Giddens is at Kansas State. Anyway, they have another really good running back backing up Devin Neal. Kansas State not only has DJ Giddens, they went out and got Dylan Edwards from Colorado, who's a star, who's a stud. Don't forget we've got to play Ollie Gordon this year, arguably the best running back in college football. Oh, by the way, Texas Tech has Taj Brooks, another 1,000-yard rusher. Oh, by the way, UCF has R.J. Harvey, another 1,000-yard rusher, and behind him they've got another guy who, again, can't think of his name, who was another great running back that they brought in. I'm trying to think of the other guy, the other team. The Iowa State running back, Samu, could be a star. This league is absolutely loaded with good running backs. That's going to be the challenge. But yes, to answer your question, Stopping the run is going to be critical. WV Mountain Area with Kenny says NCAA, all they do is blow smoke with no burn. NCAA is a thing of the past for sure. They have done nothing but hurt college football. Thy will be done says fall behind on PATC. Greg said more scholarships, but a similar roster limit, which will affect teams in not having as many walk-ons. Yes, correct. More scholarships, lower roster, so more guys will be on scholarship at a lot of schools. Not as many walk-ons. Now, for West Virginia, here's where that comes into play for West Virginia, in my opinion. Oh yeah, Patrick Richard Reese at Baylor. Sorry, I forgot about him, man. He's kind of under the radar. Another talented running back. Thanks for reminding me. A school like West Virginia, and I'm sure there are other schools out there. West Virginia doesn't. The state of West Virginia doesn't put out a lot of scholarship level D1 talent. Okay, usually 4 or 5 guys a year who make it on scholarship at the Power 5 level out of the state of West Virginia. West Virginia typically gets most of those guys, not all of them, but they get most of them. And then they fill their walk-on spots very heavily with West Virginia kids. Coach Brown says he likes for at least, I think the number he's used is about 20%, 20 to 25% of his roster to be West Virginia kids. That's 20 to 25 guys typically, right? I think's the number. Not going to be able to do that now unless you give all those guys scholarships. And if you do that, the risk is there. If you give a kid a scholarship just because he's from the state, you may lose out on a kid from another state who's more talented. Now, yes, we've seen stories like the Hudson Clements, the Preston Foxes, where kids earn scholarships and end up being good enough, but those are not the norm. Those are actually the rarer cases. Walk-ons typically don't see a whole lot of playing time, or they might play on special teams, if anything, right? There's going to be a lot less of that. So you might see West Virginia with a lot less players from the state on the roster. It's unfortunate because they love that state connection, but it's going to be hard to justify bringing a walk-on on just because he's from the state. If he's not good enough, if there's a question as to whether or not he's good enough to play and good enough to take a scholarship, then they're probably not going to add him. That's going to be the biggest thing about a state like West Virginia. And there's other states like them who don't put out a lot of Power 5 talent, Power 4 talent. All those states are going to be impacted by this the most, in my opinion. You'll see those players going to smaller schools. Now, they could go get scholarships at smaller schools, though, so it's not necessarily going to be a bad thing for them necessarily. And you might see guys who might have walked on at West Virginia go somewhere like a Division II school and get a scholarship, or even an FCS school and get a scholarship. So maybe this will actually, as I'm thinking through this and talking out loud, maybe it actually benefits some of these smaller schools. I don't know. You tell me. It could actually benefit the smaller schools in the end. I don't know. Maybe they get more Power 4 level talent because, a walk-on in a Power 4 might be a really good player and a starter at a smaller school, Patrick says same problem for Baylor, already concerned about losing walk-ons. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this affects schools like ours. WV football going deep. Linebackers will be the big difference on defense. Kova was a liability in pass coverage. Great point. And about 50-50 in run fits. Athletic but error prone. That is a great point. I love Lee Kova. He played like a man possessed. He was extremely athletic, but he was not good in pass coverage. The players they're bringing in now, and they have now, I think, will be better. I think they'll be better in pass coverage. Obviously, time will tell. We'll see. But I think you're onto something there. WV football going deep. I really like. This might be my favorite room on the team. I'm not gonna lie to you. I am in love with the linebacker room at West Virginia. I've heard. I think it was Chris Anderson, Mike Lazaza. I don't think they feel the same, and maybe they probably know more than I do because they see the team up close and personal. But man, I just think the talent level. I think they're looking more at the depth and at the age of the players. I'm looking at the talent. Guys, Josiah Trotter's dad is Jeremiah Trotter. The kid knows football. He's going to be a high IQ player more than likely. They say I think it's him. I've heard he's a film junkie. He's going to be a high IQ player. For him missing last season, Yes, physically he missed out, but he was still getting mental reps. He was still watching film, all of that. So he's not going to be as far behind maybe as we think. Okay. And he came in physically ready to go day one. He was like 240 pounds as a freshman. Physically, he's going to be able to hold up, right? So I'm not worried about that part of it. And Reed Carrico has been practicing with guys at Ohio State for the last 3 years. You don't think he's seen some talent? I love it. He says it's good to see me. Hey, I'm optimistic. Maybe I should say because I'm in a good mood today. I don't know. But I'm really excited about the line. Again, if you want me to be realistic and a little bit less optimistic, I am still concerned about the secondary. I'm concerned about guys moving up a level, maybe taking them a few games to get accustomed. And they're, West Virginia can't afford to lose games because these guys aren't ready to play. Yeah, losing the Penn State game is not going to hurt them that much. I agree. But they need to beat Pitt. They obviously need to beat Albany. They need to beat Pitt because it's a rivalry game. And they don't want to go into Big 12 schedule with a loss, in my opinion. And they need to start Big 12 play out strong against Kansas. They need to win that Kansas game at home. Or is it at home? I can't remember. Anyway, yes, the Kansas game's at home. They need to go into that Kansas game and win it. They need to win that game at home. And they don't need these guys from lower levels, trying to get ready to they need them to be ready to go is what I'm trying to say. They need to be ready and comfortable playing at the Power 5 level. Joey says he's afraid we're going to have to outscore a lot of teams. Maybe, Joey, maybe I'm too optimistic about it. I've been saying I don't think West Virginia's defense is going to necessarily be top 20 in the country or anything like that. But I do think they can be a top 50 defense in the country. And I think that will be I think West Virginia's offense can be one of the top 5 to 10 offenses in the nation. Okay. Overall. And I think if the offense is that good, the defense won't need to be elite. If they can just be top 50 in the country, that's going to be good enough, in my opinion. And one thing I haven't even mentioned is turnovers. Our defense needs to force more turnovers this year. More forced fumbles, especially. They got several interceptions last year, thanks to Beanie Bishop, mainly. But I'd like to see him force more turnovers, primarily more forced fumbles this year, and get those fumbles. West Virginia needs to force more turnovers. You've got to win a turnover battle in this league. Anyway, Daniel says, if you look at the schedule, it's not as bad as people think. Bye weeks before or after any. That is true, Daniel. I think I talked about that when I did my show about the schedule. That is one thing I like about it is they gave them, before they go to Arizona, they get a bye week. And I think they get one before Oklahoma State as well. So without having it in front of me. So I do like that. I do like that aspect of it. Couz more optimistic, Joey more pessimistic. But yeah, anyway, guys, listen, if you're watching on Twitter, in total, I've got 219 people watching. Thank you for supporting what I do here at Couz's Corner. If you're watching on Twitter, X, whatever you call it, please go check out my past videos over on my YouTube channel. The pre-recorded stuff I do doesn't end up on X, only my live streams. So please go check it out. Again, I want to give a shout out to Cats, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner. Thank them for being my channel sponsor. I have another sponsor I'm going to be adding to the list, to the team, I should say, starting August 1st. I'm very excited about that. You'll see who it is on August 1st. Excited about this new partnership I'm getting into. And so anyway, and I've got, like I said, I've got some big plans coming up for the show this football season. But go check out the Jonathan Martin podcast. He did his first show over there as well. He and I are teaming up to do our Gold and Blue Breakdown show, but he's also doing his own podcast where he's going to talk about some different things. And, other than what we talk about on my show. Also, August 1st, we have the Mountaineer Roundtable. Earbeard over at the Earbeard podcast. I think it's Fear the Beard podcast, I think is what it's called. Another West Virginia podcaster. He's organized this Mountaineer Roundtable. It's myself, him, Jonathan Martin, Mike Ostie, the Recipe Boys kids, several others. A lot of West Virginia content creators and journalists are getting together to do this Mountaineer Roundtable discussion about the season. August 1st, 6 p.m. on X. If you're on X, it's going to be a Spaces. Come join us on August 1st at 6 o'clock. It's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it. I think Jordan Couz might be involved in that as well. Can't remember. But nonetheless, if he's not, I'm going to invite him and make sure he is. But nonetheless, come check us out. It should be fun. And Daniel, there is a bye between KU at home and OU. That's what I thought, Daniel. But thanks for confirming it for me. Oh my gosh. What generosity. Appalachia Africa Twin. Thank you. Thank you, man, for the generosity. He says, here's a bottle of Four Roses single barrel bourbon for you, Couz. Great show. Four Roses. Now, that's a new one, Appalachia. I have not heard of that one. Four Roses bourbon. I'm going to have to check that one out. I've got, let me introduce, you live in West Virginia. If you're ever in Kentucky, get you a bottle of Brothers Wright bourbon. It's a new company. They actually, I do business with them on my day job, and they started their own bourbon company. They're in the construction industry, but they have now also have a second business, a sister business making bourbon called Brothers Wright Distilling. Check it out. But thank you for the recommendation. I'm going to have to check out Four Roses. Not familiar with that one. Single barrel. I'll check it out, man. Thank you. Mr. Monkey Says is predicting West Virginia 31, Penn State 24. I hope you're right. I would definitely take that one. But anyway, again, thank you guys. Thank you guys for the support here today. Thanks Appalachia Africa Twin for the very generous donation. Thank you to everyone else who dropped super chats today. Thank you all for tuning in. Don't forget, on your way out, if you haven't yet, make sure to hit the like button. All of you can do that. You can all subscribe if you haven't yet. If you're watching on X, go to YouTube and subscribe to my channel, please. My next major goal is 10,000. It's a huge number for us YouTubers to get. It really shows that we're, I guess, quote unquote, legit. So please help me get there. Would really appreciate it. Thanks for tuning into the show. Hope you guys enjoy your weekend. Have a top shelf day. Cue Country Roads.